The CV of a 35-year-old veteran of 181 Grand Prix with a best result of 4th, and who hasn't had a full-time race seat for 3 years, wouldn't normally stand out for a Formula 1 team recruiting a new driver. So why is Haas seriously considering Nico Hulkenberg for a 2023 race seat? It's a good question. After all, Hulkenberg has had his chance in F1 and failed to deliver on the prodigious potential he showed in his stellar junior career. So what's the point in a comeback? Shouldn't he stand aside and allow another, younger driver their shot? Some will make that argument, but you can build a pretty compelling case for Hulkenberg being a very good fit for Haas. The team has yet to make its final decision, so it's far from certain that Hulkenberg will make a full-time F1 comeback next year. But for those doubting his suitability, a closer look at the Haas team's situation and Hulkenberg's track record should persuade you that he could well be worth one more shot in F1. Any arguments about whether or not Hulkenberg deserves another chance in Formula 1 are irrelevant to Haas's decision-making process. Its priority is to sign the best available driver, not to choose someone based on wider perceptions of who merits a shot. So it's all about the contribution they can make on and off track. That's the sum of speed, racecraft, technical ability and the myriad other skills of an F1 driver. Haas is a minor player in the driver market, so must choose from a ragtag group of experienced drivers who either have, or are in danger of, falling off the F1 wagon, and unproven newcomers. Haas values experience, it always has done. Running rookies Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin served only to underscore the unease with F1 newcomers, given concerns about consistency and the inevitable errors. It's no coincidence that other than when it signed that pair for financial reasons, Haas has always avoided rookies, and team principal Günther Steiner has regularly stressed the need for experience. The ultimate decision on who to sign will be made by team owner Gene Haas, who also values a healthy F1 CV. And if there is a commercial dimension to this, Hulkenberg would presumably satisfy any desire that might exist from sponsor 1+1, a German telecommunications company, for a driver from its home country. Now, were Haas to have on its books a driver of prodigious potential with a strong junior CV, which it doesn't, they would be a logical choice given the long-term upside. Likewise, if there was a prodigiously talented protégé, as in future world champion material, from one of the big teams to take on loan, one of the calibre of George Russell when he was at Williams or Charles Leclerc when he went to Sauber, that would be a no-brainer. But Haas doesn't have such an option. When it comes to experienced drivers, the cupboard is relatively bare. Daniel Ricciardo has discounted himself from the running by admitting he won't be on the grid, and the other driver who has lost their race seat, Nicholas Latifi, has not done enough in his 3 years with Williams to warrant serious consideration. That leaves Haas with what's effectively a choice between Hulkenberg, keeping hold of Schumacher, and former Alfa Romeo driver Antonio Giovinazzi. Even its own reserve driver, Pietro Fittipaldi, who started 2 races as a stand-in for Romain Grosjean in 2020, isn't being seriously considered. It all comes down to the results the various candidates can be expected to achieve, and Haas suspects that Hulkenberg could well be a better bet than Schumacher. Hulkenberg has a proven track record of scoring points in F1. Of the candidates for a drive, he's the only one who has produced consistently heavy scoring in F1, with 97 points finishes in 181 starts, a strike rate of almost 54%. Hulkenberg has spent 3 seasons on the sidelines since losing his Renault drive at the end of 2019, but in sporadic outings as a stand-in, he's shown he's still absolutely capable of cutting it in F1. His 3 appearances in 2020 yielded 2 points finishes and a DNS, while he also did a good job in his 2 appearances for Aston Martin at the start of this year. Having never driven the 2022 specification F1 car before, with a single simulator session covering less than 100 laps significantly earlier in the year by way of preparation, he outqualified Lance Stroll in Bahrain. The race didn't go so well, with an early lockup causing tyre damage on his way to last place, but his run to 12th in Saudi Arabia showed he'd learned some of the lessons from his first start. That suggests with a full season and proper preparation, he would be operating at a very good level. That brings us to the elephant in the room when it comes to Hulkenberg in F1, his record-setting 181 starts without a podium finish. This is often cited as the killer statistic in condemning Hulkenberg, but although it is clearly true, the addition of a little context shows it's not quite the gotcha many think of it as. In his 9 full seasons in F1, Hulkenberg has driven for teams that have claimed a total of just 4 podium finishes. All 4 of those went to Sergio Perez, but this wouldn't even be a topic for discussion had a strategic misjudgment and slow pit stop not led to Hulkenberg losing what would have been a podium finish at Monaco in 2016, a race where Perez picked up 3rd place. That's not to say there weren't reasons for Hulkenberg's failure to take podium opportunities elsewhere. While he did improve in this area, Hulkenberg never achieved the same mastery of tyre management that Perez did. He also made mistakes that cost him podium finishes, famously colliding with Lewis Hamilton while attempting to take the lead at Interlagos in 2012, and crashing his Renault in Germany 2019 while running 4th and in the hunt for a top 3. But Hulkenberg has been close enough to podiums on a number of occasions. His 4th place for Sauber in the 2013 Korean Grand Prix stands out as a performance worthy of a place on the rostrum, one that led Fernando Alonso to describe him as superb. But the fact he has spent his whole career in midfield machinery means that assessing his performance requires a little more subtlety than simply looking at his number of top 3 finishes. Hulkenberg is no stranger to competing at the front, even if his only race victory since he graduated to F1 with Williams in 2010 was in the 2015 Le Mans 24 Hours. In his F1 career, he's racked up 161 laps running in the top 3, and the idea that he's a serial choker when on course for top finishes isn't supported by the facts. The 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix is a microcosm of Hulkenberg's time in F1. He, along with Jenson Button, stayed out on slicks when the rain hit and pulled out an enormous lead over the pack. Only a safety car, which the Force India team felt was unnecessary, closed the field back up. Without that, Hulkenberg would have finished 2nd at worst. But Hulkenberg only had himself to blame for the half spin that later allowed Lewis Hamilton to take the lead, and the bodged attempt to repass the McLaren driver at the first corner that resulted in the collision. Even so, it was an exceptional performance in a race that could have yielded one of the most unlikely victories in 21st century F1. Hulkenberg's quality has always been clear, and that's what's made him a candidate for the Haas drive. The key question is how much Hulkenberg really wants to return to racing full-time. Aside from his F1 outings, Hulkenberg hasn't raced elsewhere, although he was due to contest an ADAC GT Masters race in Germany and turned down pursuing a potential IndyCar career after a promising first test for SP Arrow McLaren at Barber Motorsport Park in October 2021, for personal reasons. He admitted earlier this year that he was mentally done with F1 after his Renault stint, adding that he was keen but not desperate for a full-time return. There were also concerns about Hulkenberg's fitness when he dropped in for those stand-in races, but preparing for a full season is a very different situation to being on standby, and if Haas has any concerns about this, it would be straightforward enough to monitor Hulkenberg's preparation in the period building up to signing any deal. So there are legitimate reasons to question whether Hulkenberg really would go to the extremes Haas will demand of their driver in terms of performance. But word is that he has been pushing hard for the Haas opportunity, which has convinced the team that he genuinely is willing to put in the effort and dedication required to make the most of the chance, should he get it. It could be that his years on the sidelines have reinvigorated him for one last crack at F1, especially given the current generation of cars and tyres that allow drivers to push harder for longer should play better to his skill set than the conditions that prevailed for much of the 2010s. That's why the key question Gunther Steiner and Gene Haas need to answer when deciding whether or not to sign Hulkenberg is whether they are confident Hulkenberg is no longer done with F1 and is willing to go that extra mile that all F1 drivers must to maximise the results. If the answer is yes, then he's an outstanding option. After all, Haas has underachieved this season by scoring only 34 points. That's why it needs whoever does take the available seat for 2022 needs to extract the full potential of the car more consistently and turn its pace into regular points. Hulkenberg has proved in the past that he can do that. He should also help push Kevin Magnussen harder. While much is made of their public spat after the 2017 Hungarian Grand Prix, their relationship really isn't problematic, and they will likely work well enough together. What's more, Hulkenberg's experience should also help the team technically. So the payoff for Haas would likely be a stronger season than if Schumacher stays on, which is still a possibility given the decision has yet to be made. Clearly, Hulkenberg is never going to fulfil what once seemed to be his destiny of emerging as a World Championship contender in F1, and he has limitations that have condemned him to that status. But he's still a driver capable of touches of genius, and at worst, he will be a consistent, dependable driver who will rack up the results that the team is capable of, even if there is the odd mistake along the way. That makes him a strong candidate for the Haas drive, and the case that Hulkenberg is the driver it needs is compelling, given the need to ensure the steps forward in pace in 2022 are built on and don't go to waste.